siblings. I didn't approve of very many that I read, actually, because most of the people who were doing the studies talked to the parents and didn't talk to the kids.
Right.
And what they didn't understand, there's been studies done since that where they have spoken to the kids. The best one is done by a woman named Joanna Fanos, who, when I read her study, that was done about 10 or 15 years ago, I suddenly felt validated in terms of my behavior and my reaction. But the kids are usually very invested in hiding from the parents how they're really feeling. And even with all my tantrums, I was expressing feelings without relating to my parents what was behind the feelings.
Right, you didn't say why you were feeling this way. They knew you were angry. They knew that you were mad at them or mad at the world, but they didn't know why. They didn't
the really bad tantrums started in my teen years, around the time that kids we knew with CF started to die.
Yes.
And I started to go to funerals. And every funeral I went to, I saw my sister in the coffin. And that would usually trigger several months worth of
really bad
well,
behavior.
but because the other side of grief often is anger, and the other side of fear often is anger. And when you are feeling disempowered or powerless, sometimes getting angry makes you feel a sense of power.
But the book, goes on, and it goes through your sister actually. And she's just a remarkable person, and it's hard for me not to say character because I'm so accustomed to, but this does read like fiction.
But that's good,
in many
because
ways.
I wrote it with fictive techniques. I wanted it to read like a novel.
And it does. It very much does. And she is quite remarkable. But she's a normal kid too. She gets mad. She gets tired of this. She wants to be normal. And what is that? What is to be normal in a situation which is so not normal and cannot be normal? And
well, when I was writing it, I think in some earlier drafts, it was kind of my sister was an angel story, which I definitely did not want to write. And one of my writing mentors actually just pointed out to me in a very simple way that when you look at a painting, there's light and there's shadow. And that when we're writing for character, we have to do the same. So she said, and so be willing to look at your sister, be willing to look at yourself and your mother and everyone else, and show them as real people, so that when I show them, not the bad parts of them, but I show them struggling with something.
Sure.
So then when they do triumph, it really means something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Now, you initially wrote this book more as as an exercise is not quite what I mean, but as a.
I didn't know what I was.
You were writing
I just
it
started
to
to
write.
I started writing it to keep the promise. And I'd always been a good writer, and I always thought when I was a kid that I would be a writer. But all the lady writers I knew when I was a kid either killed themselves or died penniless and in ignominy, and that was not for me.
That wasn't your plan.
No.
Mine either.
So I became an actor.
But I went to school. My plan was to be an actress. I didn't decide to be a writer until I was, in my middle 40s.
Well, there we are. And I was 32 when I started writing. I think it all comes from the same well. It's the creativity and the need to express yourself. You got something to say. So, what medium are you going to choose to say it in? But I was always like a good writer through high school, etc. But the idea of actually sitting down and writing a book, and I was so, the first draft was really like a grade 12 essay kind of draft. And it did take me 20 years to write it.
Oh my goodness!
But I wasn't sitting there every day at the computer.
But then once you finished writing it, once you wrote the end and you felt good about it, and it was ready to, what made you come to the decision that you were going to now have it published?
All the friends and writing mentors that I'd had, many of them from the International Women's Writing Guild, which was an organization I joined that really helped me write the book, they were insisting that it was good enough to put out there and that it was important that I share this with the world. And actually one day a friend of mine sat down with me and he said, "You are afraid that if you let this go out into the world, your relationship with Pam will end again, because you've been keeping it up through this book." And he said, "I promise you," he said, "when this book goes out into the world, your relationship with Pam will become even more than it has been since she died. And that's been absolutely true.
Oh, well, you know, it's like I got the DVD because you had the DVD with the interview that kind of goes back and forth between an interview that your sister gave, I guess fairly close to her death.
Yes.
Yes. And then an interview with you, and it goes back and forth, and it's an incredibly moving piece of video. And people can see that by going to your website.
On my website,
There's a link to that. Okay, and we'll put a link up so that the viewers can see how to go see that little piece of video. And it is an amazing piece of video. So you went out and you...
Well, I had been going to the International Women's Writers Guild summer conference for many, many years. And the gals there had been bugging me. So finally in 2005, I realized if I went back to the conference and had not at least sent it out, they were probably going to stone me, as supportive as they had all been.
Well, that's what we do.
And I actually left it to the night before I got on the train to go up to the conference to mail out my 6 packages. But I did the old query letter route, which it almost took me longer to write the query letter than the book. Those are tough.
Well, that's a whole art form, is how to write a query letter. And, you know, and it is the way that many people go about finding an agent or an editor, is to write that query letter. I imagine you got responses to your query letters right away.
Well, and I was stunned that I did, actually. I sent out 6, and I was expecting, from all the conferences I'd been to, and I'd seen panels where they said, you know, this will take months, be warned. So I sent the first 6 out, and I thought, all right, so, you know, I'll wait 3 or 4 months, and then I'll send out another 6. But I was lucky that I got a response pretty much right away. And the awful thing about that is, I'll tell you a funny story. I'd gone back and forth about tense in this book.
Oh, yes.
And I had
tense,
a draft
past
and tense, a present, a draft and past. And so finally, the book was all in present tense, and I decided to put it all in past tense. So I was going through it line by line, and it was just tedious. And a girlfriend, another writer, called me, and she says, oh, don't you know, on your computer, there's a little thing where you can put replace. And you can like replace a word all the way through the book, just on a stroke. And I thought, oh, this is going to save my life. So I just gaily started to replace.
She didn't tell you about word fragments, did she?
No, she didn't. So after about half an hour of changing words, I started to read the manuscript. And things like cystic fibrosis had become cystic fibrose.
Yes. I just had something like this. See, I write in first person, and some of my novels are in first person, but some of them are not. But I always write a first draft in first person, even if I've got multiple points of view characters. If this is Joe's scene, I pretend to be Joe, and I write in first person the first draft, because that makes sure that, I don't know, it gets the voice more authentic in my mind. Then I go back and I change it to third person if it is a multiple point of view character novel and is in third person. I change it to that. And sometimes I'll miss things because, you know, it's so difficult to proofread your own work. And recently one of my critique partners laughed because I had written in my book, "She held my tongue." Because I changed it from "I held my tongue," and I'd missed, so I'd gotten the first word right, but it says "she held my tongue," and my critique partner writes in the margin, "How dare she?"
Well, my manuscript was full of these word burgers. At the time, the agents called me and said, "Would you please submit your manuscript?" So I had 2 weeks of absolute crazy time trying to get it in shape.
It's so hard to proofread your own work. But then, you know, you've
But I got a marvelous
agent.
I got a marvelous agent and a wonderful publisher, and the whole experience has changed my life.
And I noticed when I picked it up that the foreword in this book was written by Celine Dion.
Yeah.
And so because doesn't she have a nephew or
her niece also died from CF,
I
and
see.
she